Raise your hand if you've ever cracked before. Today, we are talking about the breaks between the registers. This is something that plagues every human being on this planet. It is common to experience this break between registers, usually the chest and the head registers. This might be accompanied by a crack, a flip, a sudden decrease in volume or strength, and maybe a sudden change in tone. Other words for this break are passagio, which is the Italian word for passage. Sometimes middle or bridge are also used. And in a lot of types of singing, the goal is to make it seem as if there is no break. Now, we learned in the previous video that there are different registers that have different muscles involved, and these are very real anatomical things that happen in the voice. However, when it comes to singing, usually we want to unify the voice to make it sound as if those separations don't exist. This is especially true in classical singing and other older styles. However, there are a couple types of singing in which people like to emphasize the break. The two most prominent that I can think of are yodeling. You can hear he's flipping back and forth between the two registers. The other, slightly more subtle but still common example of emphasizing the break is in some effects in country music. And the whole world. Listen one more time on the word whole right here. And the whole world. Little flip there. It's a short little effect, but it's very effective for the style. Now, you already know that both male and female voices have a chest register and a head register. But the proportions in these voices are a little bit different. You can see for women that the bigger proportion of their range sits predominantly in the head register, and the smaller portion sits in the chest register. So for women, the break from chest to head happens proportionally lower in their range than men. For men, most of their range sits within the chest register, and then they flip to head voice a little higher in their range relative to women. The proportions are flipped. Even though male voices in general sing about an octave lower than women, their chest to head break is around the same place. This natural break, or passagio, passage, varies between individual voices, but for most men and women, it sits between about C4, which is middle C, and around F sharp 4. So between these two pitches, most people will transition from chest to head voice. Now, these breaks can be altered, that is, you can lift the chest voice higher and the head voice lower based on stylistic needs, and we'll talk about that in another lesson. But most people naturally make this transition around this area. While we're talking about this word passagio, there's a couple of other things that you need to know. For women, this second passagio happens a little bit higher in the range. Now, this shift is not as dramatic as the one from chest to head. For most women, it's described as a little bit of a narrowing. That is, the sensation feels like it gets a little bit smaller, a little more precision is required when navigating this area. And this happens between about D flat 5 and F sharp 5. That's the octave above middle C. So between about those notes, it varies for every voice. There's going to be a little bit of a transition that happens there. Men have another transition as well below their natural break from chest to head, and this happens about 2 octaves lower than the one for women. Now, this varies for every voice, but it's good to know about these little transition areas because they require just a little bit more attention, usually, than the rest of the range. I think it's really interesting to note the symmetry in the range between the two different voices. As in the example of yodeling in country, it's totally awesome to use breaks for style. That is, if you intend to use them. We want to be able to have control over when and where breaks happen. In order to do this, we generally want to learn to bring the head voice a little bit lower than we might do naturally, and also learn to bring the chest register upward a little bit to mix these two registers together and smooth that transition. In the voice world, there's a category of exercises that work particularly well for this type of thing. These exercises hold back a little bit of the air to prevent the voice from getting overloaded with pressure or too much stress. One of the best exercises for this are straw exercises. So we're gonna start with a straw and we're gonna sing a fifth. Then we can go up by half step. If you feel adventurous or you're feeling comfortable with that, you can add an octave to it. Now, you may have heard that when I just did it that last time, there was a little bit of a notch in my voice where the head and the chest didn't completely coordinate together. This is a great opportunity to use a strategy that Jeannie Levitri calls waiting for the bus. That is, I'm gonna stay on those pitches and repeat the exercise until I feel like the muscles are coordinating properly. Now that one was better for me, I can keep moving up. This is something that's great to do throughout your range. Other versions of these exercises include lip trills, NG, N, humming, a V sound, and you can even do the straw exercise with the end of the straw in a cup of water. Choose whichever exercise or series of exercises that's most comfortable for you. But in all of the exercises, it's super important to stay open, stay extremely relaxed in the jaw, in the throat, in the body, taking really, really good low breaths, and try not to sing too loud. There can be a tendency to push the volume when we're singing, but with these exercises, they work best, as in all singing, when we're not trying to push too hard. And finally, allow the chest voice and the head voice to exchange freely. This might feel a little strange at first if you're used to singing in one register over the other, but it's really important that you give your body permission to flip into another register. Although this might be a little disjointed at first, if you continue to work through these exercises, it will get smoother over time. Next lesson, we're going to talk about mixing. Mixing. Mixing is so huge and important and sometimes confusing because we hear it and we don't know what it means. So let's talk about what mixing means in the next lesson. See you then.